Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for another Q&A session on Ukuleles for Ukraine by the Ukulele Kids Club. My name is Marlen Rodriguez-Wolf, and I'm the CEO of the Ukulele Kids Club. And I'm so excited to be here today because we are going to be talking to Dr. Indra Selvarajah, who is the chair of the Global Crisis Intervention Commission for the World Federation of Music Therapy. When I was first introduced to the World Federation, I was a student, and I had this idea of a UN-type building with all of the music therapy associations from around the world represented and sharing and advancing the field of music therapy worldwide. So it's very wonderful for me to now collaborate with them to respond to the global crisis that we're seeing around the world, and specifically to the Ukraine situation that we're seeing evolving. So without further ado, I'm going to allow Dr. Indra to come in. Welcome, Indra. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me for this important chat.
Thank you so much for staying up. I know it's quite late where you are.
It's well worth it.
Lovely. So I would like to start off just by knowing a little bit about you. How did you get into the field of music therapy? And then how did you get involved with the World Federation?
So I've actually had an interest in music therapy for some time, but I originally was doing a music performance and then a music psychology stroke performance degree and master's in my earlier training in the UK. But I chanced upon music therapy when I was training in the UK, and it just blew me away. I didn't see prospects for doing music therapy in Malaysia at that time. So I came back and I got a job in the university where I taught music psychology, but they did ask me to do an introduction course into therapy. I couldn't do the clinical work, obviously, because I was not trained and qualified at that point, but I was able to share the theoretical side of it. But down the road, I actually had an opportunity to get involved in the ISME World Conference that was held in Malaysia, and it was something phenomenal for us because it was the first time in 33 years that ISME had held its World Conference in Malaysia, in anywhere near Asia. So I was roped in, and I had an opportunity then to actually help organize the ISME Music Therapy Commission Seminar in Malaysia. So that really was something that I wanted to do very strongly because I had had a glimpse of music therapy in the UK. I was just convinced that this was something that we needed to do in Malaysia to benefit the community. Long story short, we organized the commission seminar. It was an amazing response from the local community. And so that really convinced myself, but also my university, that this was something we should look into. And I was very fortunate because in the course of organizing this commission seminar, I had a chance to meet some fantastic music therapists around the world. And I was encouraged actually to go into the field by one of the professors who was from Florida State University. And she was very kind, and she said she just thought that I would be a good fit for music therapy. So because I respected her so much and I trusted in her judgment, I thought at the very least I should look into it. But I actually had already an interest in serving the community through music, and I was doing a lot with my church, with local outreach work. And this became something that was almost like a dream come true to consider going into music therapy. I ultimately got a government scholarship to be able to go over to the States and get the training. I had to do a master's equivalency as well as then the PhD. And it was really a fantastic experience, no regrets at all. And I really thank that professor for encouraging me in that direction.
So since you began with music therapy, you started right away with advocacy. So sharing about the field and what it looks like. Did you ever question that about how much advocacy you would need to do for this field?
Well, that was something actually that when I stepped into it and realized that there was a real need for education, a lot of people had heard about music, and there was a lot of mysticism surrounding the ways in which music might be able to help. But at the same time, the scientific grounding and the evidence-based side of it lacked the level of depth that I realized with the training that it was also my responsibility to help people better understand that this is not a mystical application of music, but it's something that's very evidence-based, but it's also backed up by scientific research. And we are doing a lot of things that are being tried and tested through the rigor of research. And the safety and the welfare of time is always in a priority. So the advocacy work was absolutely necessary. It's very hard work because you're trying to also fight against stigma and social ignorance in ways that, especially in this part of the world where I am in Malaysia, many people are still not well versed with the effects of music, and they don't necessarily appreciate and understand the value of music. So that was something which I'm thankful that my job in the university earlier on sort of already made me aware that there would be these conversations, there would be these battles. So I think it also helped to prepare me in many ways to do the advocacy work. But it has been a lot of hard work going down to the grassroots, working with the community, listening, and trying to understand what people's needs are first, and then figuring out sensitive ways to introduce music into their context.
Yes, because like you just said, it's not about this is the one answer for music and this is how you apply it. It depends on the context and the country in which you're expecting to help. So
Absolutely.
then, considering that, how did you move into working with the World Federation of Music Therapy, which has to consider that context around the world?
Well, I was fortunate because after the initial work that I've been doing in Malaysia, just working, in my small corner, just trying to do what I could to apply the training as best as I could from the US, I was approached by one of the commissions to consider a committee role. And after that, subsequently, that led to an invitation to consider being involved on the council. So I really, really feel grateful for the opportunities that were opened up. There were 2 positions that they were considering. I told them, look, I trusted them to make the right decision. If they thought there was anything I could do to contribute that might serve the best interests of music therapy and the profession. And so that was ultimately how I ended up on the WFMT.
Okay, and so for the WFMT right now, you are the chair of the Global Crisis Intervention Commission. Can you tell me a little bit about the history of how that was formed?
Well, it's really interesting because as far as the first crisis that actually sparked the work under the World Federation as part of our crisis intervention portfolio, it was an earthquake in China that happened in 2008. And it was an earthquake with a magnitude of 8, and it occurred in the Sichuan province. And this was a really serious earthquake, as you can imagine. And this resulted in more than 90,000 deaths. And there were, I think 370,000 who were injured. And the Chinese music therapists, the students responded very quickly to the disaster, but they also called upon the help of international experts. And that's where the World Federation actually came in. And there was a gathering of experts in China under the first crisis intervention conference organized by China that actually helped to also spark the work. And I have to really, really take my hat off to the initial team that led this commission. It was Dr. McGill from Canada, but we also had the will and the support of not just the World Federation, but also the AMTA. At that time, Barbara Wheeler was the president. And we also had Barbara Els as well involved. And so these were all people who were very experienced music therapists, but they gathered around this extraordinary circumstance in China, and that actually helped to spark the work.
Wow. And so right now, what would you say the mission of the Crisis Intervention Commission is?
Well, at this point, I have to say that as an international nonprofit organization, we bring together music therapy associations and individuals from around the world who are interested in promoting music therapy and developing music therapy globally. But as far as the GCIC is concerned, a lot of what we do is really to support the work of music therapists on the ground who are affected by or responding to trauma and crisis, both natural and man-made, as well as across the world. So the Commission facilitates communication, maintains a collection of materials, information to use in disasters or traumatic crisis situations. And this is all meant to inform facilitating the work of music therapists who are responding to crisis around the world. It also means that with the work that we are doing, we have a transparent process to make sure that music therapists around the world who happen to be caught in a crisis situation can reach out to us directly with their requests, and we have processes to guide them.
And so the crisis that you respond to has to be in affiliation with music therapists that exist on the ground. Is that correct?
Absolutely, because we are working through music therapists and with music therapists. But we do not negate the fact that if there are groups of people on the ground who consists of creative arts therapists. We've had one response to the crisis in Beirut, which happened a couple of years ago. And there were psychologists who were also interested in music therapy, but we ultimately want to go through music therapists. And we take a lot of trouble to get through the process to ensure that we're working with the professionals who are music therapists, but serving the community in whatever way is needed.
Yeah, and as you know, with being a global organization, we struggle with the same things, where sometimes our priority is to partner with music therapists, but the need far outweighs the amount of music therapists that there are in the world. So I do want to clarify that at some point, we do have to be flexible with the coalitions we create outside of music therapy.
And that's a very, very important point. And one of the projects that the WFMT is embarking in is also going into the setting up of what we call care teams, in which music therapists are going to be working with their associations, because we have organizational members that are associations, and reaching out to the community at the ground, wherever we can find suitable partners who are willing to work alongside music therapists. But we are very, very strict in making sure that where we are providing music therapy support, that we are representing music therapy through the actual music therapists.
Yeah, perfect. So then in terms of, there's so much need, there's so many crises that happen throughout the year and throughout our lives. How do you go about choosing which crisis to respond to? Is there a vetting process that you undertake?
There is, although I have to be very honest, because we are really here to support the entire global community, that sometimes the burden is to ensure that we are as equitable as possible in being able to reach out. So we try to, use the platforms that we have. And, every time we have opportunities like this, for example, to give an interview, it's also an opportunity for us to reach out to the music therapy community and to let them know of the kinds of support that is available through the World Federation. And what we do is we have information on our main website, but we also have a social media presence, and we try from time to time to reach out. Many of us actually are presenting in conferences. We try to explore various platforms to inform music therapists of the work of the World Federation and the different support services that are available, including crisis intervention. But one of the things that we frequently do at the start of a crisis, if we happen to hear about it, is we put out the initial messaging to try to reach out. And the music therapists, I say, have been very cordial and they've been very supportive, because sometimes they will channel colleagues that they know who happen to be in that country, and they will reach out to us. So it's a very collaborative process, and we really rely on the support of music therapists who know of a particular situation, and we actually receive referrals from fellow music therapists who may or may not be organizational or individual members, but they have actually had that heart of concern to reach out, inform us of the situation, and then we follow up.
Yeah, and I saw the post that you guys did the other day on the earthquake in Afghanistan, and it was very much like, we're offering support. If you need any support, please reach out to us and let us know. And at the end of the day, that is a grassroots type of networking situation that has to happen, because there's just no way that you can in every single country on every single situation at all times.
And the beautiful thing about it, the grassroots approach works. And that's one of the reasons why we also want to set up these care teams, because we recognize that we have to work in closer partnership with our organizational members, and we have to empower our music therapists, especially in crisis situations, to be able to be proactively prepared. Because the sad thing about a crisis is, by the time we respond, it usually means that something really bad has happened. And if there's a way for us to preempt and to be able to equip music therapists at least with the basics of psychological first aid, trauma-informed care, so they are better prepared. And when things are minor, or when a real crisis hasn't occurred, we would prefer to enable the therapists to know at least what they can do and how they can tap into the resources that are available to prevent that crisis from occurring. But of course, the job of the World Federation Crisis Intervention Commission is also to be there, ready to step in when the need is seen. And we try to do that as rapidly as we possibly can. But we are all volunteers. So, sometimes it's not as quick as we would like, But that is one of the reasons why we decided to set up the World Federation care teams, simply because it means then we can initiate and start that chain of reaction of events more quickly on the ground.
I think that's something very important to consider, that the average person doesn't know that all of you serving for the Federation are volunteers. You have a full-time job, you are a mother, you have lots of things demanding your attention, and you're up at midnight in Malaysia giving an interview for the World Federation.
And I was up at 8 this morning for a meeting, and it has been nonstop all day. But we do this because we believe in the work that we're doing, and we are so grateful for the opportunity to be able to spread the benefits of music therapy across the globe. I work with fantastic colleagues in the World Federation. The reason why I have continued to work with the World Federation is because I really, really believe in our mission, and partnering and collaborating with organizations like the Ukulele Kids Club to do something that's meaningful and can have an impact through music therapy is something that we really believe in.
Thank you so much. We're super proud to partner with you as well. I think it was a win-win for both of us to be able to find this collaboration. And so let's talk a little bit about this Ukraine response. Can you speak a little bit about the role of the Commission or the Federation in responding to the Ukraine crisis?
So at the onset of the crisis, we received word from music therapists in Lithuania, actually, who were trying to support the first influx of refugees. This was on top of the initial messaging that I had put out on social media, similar to what you saw with the recent message that I sent out about the Afghanistan earthquake. So we try to reach out in as many ways as we can, but ultimately the music therapists from Lithuania contacted us, and they were asking for technical training support. And so that immediately led to us, assessing the situation, what was the level of need, and then trying to figure out what is the best kind of support we can offer, which resulted in the first special webinar for Ukraine. And that was the one that we held on March 12th. And we had a fantastic response. We were really thankful that there were so many music therapists who, at that time, we were still all trying to figure out what was going on in Ukraine. And, it was a mixture of disbelief and shock, and trying to figure out what was the best way that we could respond. And the response from the music therapy community was just overwhelming. And we were so encouraged by that, because we also got a lot of people inquiring that we realized were not just involved directly with Ukraine one way or other, but these were also music therapists coming from other parts of the world who were also reaching out because they were working with refugee groups and they were asking for support. So we were really, really thankful that they used that opportunity. Music therapists are such a savvy and such an interpret bunch of people, and they are really resourceful. So they really, really came and they attended the webinar, and we got a lot of information that was really important for us to also understand what were the range of needs. So when that happened and we were able to start off with this first webinar, we also realized through the feedback that we collected, there was more than 500 over people that responded to our registration. And so we got all that feedback from them. We took that, and then we realized that out of all the requests coming, many were asking for information, guidance on how to work in a crisis. They were looking for research articles. So the work of the World Federation Global Crisis Intervention Commission at that stage went full force into the curation of music therapy care packages. So we actually collated 3 different care packages that consisted of information that would be relevant for music therapists working on the ground with refugees who were asking for information that would give them some background and understanding of how to work with refugees. We also sent the recording links from the webinar with them, but we also were conscious from our interactions, because I was having a lot of communication with the music therapists to also figure out what their condition were. Many of them were very tired. We were very, very overwhelmed. So we actually sent out information that also was involved specifically in music therapy self-care. And I have to acknowledge and thank the 80-row global 80-row crisis intervention group. I just want to make sure I got it right, who stepped up, and they actually helped us to curate a wonderful list of resources specifically focused on self-care for music therapists, because they have obviously also experienced a litany of recent natural crises in terms of earthquakes. They had the mosque shooting as well, and they've been through a lot. a credit to them. They were really stepping up to share their experience, to help others. And that has really been such an incredible support, because we were able then to come up with all these different types of care packages to send out to the music therapists who we were connected with, and to provide them with the resources that they need to be able to do their work. But that also inspired one other initiative when we realized that many of them who were working with these Ukrainian refugees, they were sharing with us that they didn't necessarily know their music. They didn't necessarily understand enough of their culture. So we at the World Federation are very much supportive of adopting, what we call cultural humility, and trying to adopt a culturally sensitive framework. So we decided at that stage, because I'm Malaysian, I do not know anything about Ukrainian music. So what we did was I actually reached out to colleagues whom I know were musicians and asked if we could track anybody who is from Ukraine and is a musician. And we were very, very thankful, because the International Choral Conductors Federation and the International Kodai Society actually responded. And they actually helped the World Federation to track down an actual conductor from Ukraine who understands the music. And so she actually worked very hard with us to help us to find the right songs, choose music that would be comforting, that would be appropriate in this kind of situation for families, for children who would be in these refugee shelters. Because as we know, the men had to stay back to fight the war, but it was mostly women, children, and the elderly who ended up in these refugee shelters. And I was having a lot of conversations with the music therapists, and we realized that if we could actually send them the music, send them recording materials that help them to learn the music quickly in a culturally appropriate way, then it would help music therapists to, almost shortcut the process, and to be able to learn the music and use it with the children they were serving and the families. So that was all possible only because of the nature of the way the World Federation works and the support of such strong collaborations.
So then the process by which you identify the therapist to work with is through the country's association?
That is part of it. Sometimes it's a bit of a mixture of reaching out to the country's associations, because we respect the fact that, for these countries, that if they have a presence of their own music therapy association, we prefer to work with them and through them. On the other hand, it also means that if the music therapists from that particular country directly contact us, then we respond accordingly, but we try to get them to also work through the associations. So in whatever way that we can connect the dots and make sure that, as I said, everything is a transparent process. And we also want to honor and appreciate the fact that there are probably a lot more music therapists who are trying to do something, who may or may not be in touch with the World Federation. So we try to cast the net widely. We try to work through our regional liaisons as well, and work very closely with the associations in the respective country. But anytime we have a direct request from a music therapist, we try to make sure also that if there is an urgent need, we respond as quickly as we can based on the nature of their request. So we don't leave anyone out.
Yes, I'm assuming, because I attended the webinar at the beginning, and that was, I don't remember, I think it was maybe March or something like that. And there is a degree of seeing how the evolves before you immediately respond. Because at the end of the day, in February, when everybody wanted to help and wanted to send aid and money, it was still too uncertain that the refugees were moving very quickly. There was numbers to know, and we didn't even know where they were going. For the therapists in Poland, the shelters were popping up left and right. They didn't even know how many of them they would end up with. So how do you assess that?
I'm so sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead. How do you assess that process of seeing how it evolves?
So that is where the complexity of, having to keep in constant touch with the music therapists on the ground. And then I was following world news. I was following all the United Nations updates religiously, until to the point my family were like, okay, she's on her phone again. She's, looking up the crisis. And sometimes it was really emotional because, trying to get all the information. I think at the beginning of the war, people were very, very conscious of what's going on. So we were able to get a lot of updates, a lot of reports, videos even, some of which, to be honest, were very hard to watch because it's unthinkable that, people have to go through these situations. And one of my fears is that as time has gone on, and as we have entered now what is effectively a third month of the war, we are starting to forget. And that's one of the things that really, really makes me so appreciative, at the same time that makes me feel really urgent about what we are trying to do with this instrument donation drive. Because I think where in the beginning of this crisis, we were a lot more alert, a lot more responsive to the situation. And, people care. I'm not saying that we don't care about what's happening in Ukraine, but we are also facing a lot of other challenges in our own lives. And I think at some point we go back to our own routines, we go back to our own concerns, and it almost feels as if we are perhaps less aware of what is happening right now. And I think what is happening with the ongoing situation of war. Now, the conductor that I mentioned, who I was initially working very closely with the Ukrainian songs and trying to check up on her regularly and find out what was the evolving situation on the ground. She has since left Ukraine, and I totally understand why. I'm just thankful she is safe. Mm-hmm. But the situation now is really bad. So I really, really hope that, whoever is watching, we can all remember that the war is on. And the number of refugees that are fleeing Ukraine are only increasing. And it is something that is unimaginable, because when I was trying to size up the situation, and you're right, it's an evolving situation. We keep having to, keep our ears to the ground, find out what's going on, and to keep tabs on a constant basis. And things are changing so quickly. But one thing is very clear, I keep hearing the word genocide being mentioned. It's almost as if whatever is happening in Ukraine right now, there is an act of destruction that is happening, which goes beyond just physical destruction. It's almost as if all these icons, monuments, archives of Ukrainian culture are also being erased and destroyed. And so one of the things that became very, very acute, and I think that is where music really can make a difference, is whatever we are doing through music is also helping to preserve and protect the culture and the soul of the Ukrainian people. I remember in one of the most difficult conversations I had with my Ukrainian friend, she has become a friend now. I was telling her, whatever people may choose to do physically, they cannot destroy the soul of the people. And through music, we can honor, and we should continue to support the spirit and the soul of the Ukrainian people. And I think it's without a doubt, we have seen the patriotism, we have seen how brave the Ukrainian people are. And now I'm not singling them out as if only the Ukraine crisis matters. This just happens to be an immediate crisis that they're dealing with. And I'm sharing with you these intimate details because, we really, really have to pay attention. And I was spending a lot of time actually listening and trying to understand things on the ground. And recently, of course, we've also seen that, with the opportunity to send across ukuleles to the refugees, now we are talking about a level of outreach that is really important at this point, because the refugee children continue to remain in these camps. They continue to be either in transit, or some of them may settle permanently in the country that they are now being hosted in. Mm-hmm. But the future is so uncertain. And this is one of the things that I've been hearing. A lot of the people in Ukraine, whether they're internally displaced or who have left, they feel a sense of foreboding simply because they do not know what the future holds. So their current coping, and anything that we can do using music to increase their coping and their ability to deal with the immediate trauma and to process their experiences, is absolutely vital to keep them psychologically afloat.
I think you've brought up some incredibly wonderful points about the role of music in responding to crises. I think when people think of crisis response and aid, they think of food, shelter, clothing, the basics of human life. But what we as music therapists know is that the music is also a basic of human life. Not only because, like you said, it provides hope and comfort during these difficult times, but like you also said, it allows you to preserve and pass on your culture from person to person. The fact that the child will now have an instrument to learn their grandmother's songs, to learn their parents' songs, and be able to make it independently, not relying on a recording or a MP3 or whatever, means that that culture will be preserved and passed on. And that's very significant in my point.
And I really, really appreciate this collaboration because, we are gifting them exactly that. The thought of providing a child with a ukulele friend that can be a source of comfort. When you see the ukulele, just the fact that it's small enough, it's almost like a doll. It's something a child can have. I have a daughter who, goes everywhere with her blanket. And, children often endear themselves to these objects of comfort. And the fact that we can give them a ukulele friend that becomes that source of comfort and allows them to be able to express themselves and to process whatever trauma, difficulties that they are going through, and to be able to make music in the safety net of what music has to offer. The songs that we curated that we were so happy to be able to share with the Ukulele Kids Club, and we know, that we're talking about putting these folk songs, into the Ukulele Kit. We are talking about lullabies, we're talking about songs from childhood that all children in Ukraine know. And so these are sources of security. We are giving the children a level of normalcy in the midst of the chaos that they're experiencing. It just helps them to be children for a few minutes and to be able to experience that childhood in a way that they get to share it with their family, with their friends. I was having some sweet conversations with some music therapists in Poland, and we were talking about how music can also serve as that bridge where children can do cultural exchanges. Because if these kids are potentially going to be staying in Poland for longer, then what could be sweeter and more direct than to build a bridge through that musical connection where they sing their songs, they share their songs, they exchange their songs with other children, with other people in the community. And that automatically helps them to build rapport. And so these are the things that we can do, and we are able to give them through music to help them to better tolerate whatever they are going through and to feel safe and comforted, to feel that they can allow their inner voice and their identity to be acknowledged and seen and heard.
Absolutely. Next week, we're going to be talking with Danny, who is a music therapist from the United States. He graduated with me actually at Berkeley, but then moved to Turkey and set up programs for music therapy in Syrian refugee care a few years ago. And so we're going to be talking a little bit more about the techniques and actual tangible work that music therapists do to address all of those wonderful things you've been talking about. Do you
fantastic.
have things to share? Any last calls to action for us to consider?
I really, really hope that anybody who happens to be tuning in and will be watching this interview to remember that your gift, the donation that you give, no matter how small the amount, it will go a long way towards providing us with the means to actually build those ukuleles, send them over to these refugee kids. And we are also trying to find a way to get them into Ukraine itself, where we know they are internally displaced people. So this is the work that is going to lead directly to benefits that will enable those who have been affected by the war in Ukraine to be able to receive a level of music therapy, support, and comfort that helps them to feel that they are not only seen and heard, and that the international community remembers them and cares for them. But we know as music therapists that music itself can be a really powerful tool to spur healing and trauma in whatever way also helps them to cope with their daily experience. So in the midst of what we are trying to do, I hope you see the reality of what your gift means and how it will translate into direct benefits to the refugee kids who are right now going through unimaginable horror, and we can do something about it to make a difference. So I really, really hope that for all of you who are listening in, whatever you are able to do, please support this campaign, because it's not about us. It's not even about music therapy. It's about the kids. This is a humanitarian effort, and we really, really appreciate your support.
Thank you so much, Indra. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. And I've agreed with everything that you've said wholeheartedly. This is our way of responding to this crisis. And music can really make a difference. It's not just nice and cute and fluffy. It's really life or death for a lot of people. And so we're very proud to be with you, to work with you in this effort. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed the Q&A. If you have any other questions, please feel free to drop them in the comments or drop them on our social media. You can learn more about the World Federation by following their social media at World Federation of Music Therapy, and their website is wfmt.info. And again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another Q&A. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Marlen, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Indra. We'll talk soon.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.